Hello everyone, it's Teacher Marian here from HelloTeacherMarian.com, and on this channel you'll find videos all about getting hired and teaching online, where I'm bringing to you valuable tips, insight, and need-to-know information. If you are in the online teaching community, specifically with Outschool, chances are you are aware of the hot topic right now, which is copyright infringement. There are many questions floating around about fair use. What constitutes fair use? Does fair use ever apply to for-profit organizations? What about the Teach Act? Well, I didn't know the answers to these questions, but I did want to do my own due diligence and try to understand what was acceptable and what wasn't. I did a good amount of research, mainly reading copyright law from universities and media law organizations online. What I found was that they pretty much all said the same thing. So I really needed to dig deeper and really dissect the words to make sure I understood whether or not I would be infringing on someone else's copyright by reading a book out loud or using a book to teach a lesson in my online classroom. If you want to know what I discovered, stick around. Now go ahead and hit subscribe and like this video if you find it helpful. Disclaimer time. I am not a copyright expert and I am not giving you advice, except to say that you will have to do your own due diligence to determine for yourself, based on your lesson content, if your class falls under fair use or not. But I will tell you what I learned, and I will cite all of the resources I used in the description box below. Also, this video is not going to address images or thumbnails or websites or even really audio that you might want to use in your classroom. This video will strictly address using books, fiction and nonfiction, to read aloud. And for me, it wasn't just to read aloud, but really to use books as a tool to help me teach a concept or a skill. Okay, so the first thing that I learned is that if I were going to be okay reading a book aloud in my online classroom, fair use was going to be my ticket. So I needed to determine, how do I make sure I'm within those fair use guidelines? Now, I've seen the Teach Act float around in conversations in different groups on Facebook. Now, the Teach Act would not apply to online teachers for Outschool. The way I understand it, the Teach Act, by the way, stands for Technology, Education, and Copyright Harmonization. It only applies to accredited, not-for-profit organizations. Another side note, the Fair Use Act hasn't changed because of COVID-19. This Fair Use Act was already in place before then, and it really didn't change anything. We did see a lot of generous offers from publishers come out and say, you know, during this distance learning, you can read my books online. There were some stipulations, though. Most of the ones I saw said you can, you know, read it in a public domain, but it must be taken down at the end of the school year. And then some publishers would say it would not, you could read online but not in a public domain, and then you would have to archive it after 24 hours of use. There were those kinds of things floating around, and none of that would really even fit my need. So right here, I'm going to go ahead and read to you Outschool's stance on copyright infringement as of this date, which is May 24th, 2020. And here's what Outschool says. It is your responsibility as an Outschool teacher to ensure that you have permission to use any content featured in your classes or class listings. This includes, but is not limited to, brand names, images, curriculum, either brand name boxed curricula or from sites such as Teachers Pay Teachers. And there's a note here that says, remember, purchasing access to materials such as these does not necessarily give you the right to use them for commercial purposes. It goes on to say, if you want to use a book, image, lesson plan, or any other resource that doesn't belong to you, we highly recommend reaching out to the creator to ask for permission. Individual creators and publishers are usually responsive to these types of questions. So as I already mentioned, I knew the Fair Use Act would be my only shot as an online teacher to be able to legally use a book in my classroom without having to write and ask permission for every lesson or every book that I wanted to use. And by the way, I have written written to a couple of publishers for permission, and I'll talk about that at the end of the video. But when reading about fair use, I kept coming across the word transformative, as in if you're using the book or article, etc., in a transformative way, it would most likely be considered fair use. So I needed to get a better understanding of what would qualify as transformative. And so that was my goal. And so again, I am no expert and I am not giving you advice. I'm just sharing what I found. So maybe this will be a place for you to begin analyzing your own lesson content and doing your own research to determine if your lessons fall under fair use or not. So what is fair use? That's what we're going to talk about first. And you guys just forgive me because I am going to just go straight from my notes in a lot of this just to make sure that I get this right. But I'm going to read the official definition of fair use, and this is from copyright.gov, and then I'll read it again in layman's terms. Okay? So according to copyright.gov, fair use is a legal doctrine that promotes freedom of expression by permitting the unlicensed use of copyright-protected works in certain circumstances. Section 107 of the Copyright Act provides the statutory framework for determining whether something is a fair use and identifies certain types of uses such as criticism, comment, news, reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research as examples of activities that may qualify as fair use. Section 107 calls for consideration of the following 4 facts in evaluating a question of fair use. So in fair use, judges would consider these 4 factors. You do not have to meet all 4 of these factors, but these are 4 factors that judges would look at. The first, they would look at the purpose and character of your use, the nature of the copyrighted work, the amount and substantiality of the portion taken, and the effect of the use upon the potential market. All right, so what does that mean in layman's terms? I'm going to read to you from Edsearchcom now. And basically, Edsearchcom says fair use is a provision of copyright law that allows many reading aloud activities to be translated from the classroom to online learning. In short, fair use is a limit on copyright law that allows anyone to use a copyrighted work for a transformative purpose that doesn't harm the core market of the original, meaning you can't compete with the publisher's efforts to sell books. This means that when teachers reading aloud online using tools like school websites, learning management systems, or live webcasts, fair use enables most of the same practices that take place in person. Okay? Where reading aloud is concerned, and this was really what I was interested in, the factors can be condensed into these 2 questions. What is the new educational purpose for which teachers and students are reading this material to each other? And what, if any, is the harm to the core market for the original book source? Okay, that was very helpful for me. Again, all of these resources are linked in the description box. But again, what is the definition of transformative? Transformative uses are those that add something to the original work. They add something new. There's a further purpose there or a different character. They do not substitute the use of the work. So in my mind, that's saying the use of this storybook, for instance, is that you would buy this storybook and read it at home, or that your parent would buy this storybook and read it aloud to you at home. So if I just read storybooks aloud, that would compete with the seller's intent to sell and distribute books, right? If it's online, I don't need to go buy it. That's one thing, and I completely understand that. And then there's another thing that is using a book as a tool to build a lesson on. In my mind, that is adding to something. It's furthering the original purpose. For instance, In one of my Outschool classes, I have a lesson on animal adjectives, and I use a storybook about animals, but I use it to teach adjectives. Okay, I wanted to read this to you. This is from the Digital Media Law Project. They are linked also. And I really thought this was important because I've been seeing both of these schools of thought or opinions float around on Facebook. I think it answers some questions. So according to the Digital Media Law Project, a common misconception is that any for-profit use of someone else's work is not fair use, and that any not-for-profit use is fair. In actuality, some for-profit uses are fair and some not-for-profit uses are not fair. The result depends on the circumstances. Courts originally presumed that if your use was commercial, it was an unfair exploitation. However, they later abandoned that assumption because many of the possible fair uses of a work listed in Section 107's preamble, such as uses for purposes of news reporting, are conducted for profit. Although courts still consider the commercial nature of the use as part of their analysis, they will not brand a transformative use unfair simply because it makes a profit. It goes on to say, if you include additional text, audio, or video that comments or expands on the original material, this will enhance your claim of fair use. Okay, so let's pick up with Edsearchcom because they have given several examples and non-examples of what constitutes as fair use. In these cases, teachers may want to read materials online and they could look to fair use for support. Okay, the first one, a teacher reads to show 2 picture books to a class as a part of a longer 30-minute lesson, including discussion questions and context. Number 2, reading an introductory segment of a nonfiction text aloud to provide students with background material and offering pre-recorded segments for students to choose to listen to next so that students can select their own learning paths. 3, beginning class sections with a chapter from a novel to orient students to the online classroom and to get them focused for learning. And 4, teachers and students collaborate to read text in parallel, contributing to a distributed reading project that documents both shared experiences and diverse voices. In all of these cases, the use is anchored in a transformative educational purpose, and it does not substitute for normal purchases of the work. These are non-controversial examples of fair use in action. All right, now here are 2 examples where you could not use fair use to support your actions. Number 1, establishing a free YouTube channel hosting readings of numerous picture books and chapter books not directly tied to their classroom teaching. And number 2, a school system trying to save money. And so they suggest that teachers consider reading review questions from commercial worksheets aloud rather than acquiring copies to distribute for student use. Okay, so those are your 2 non-examples. I was very encouraged from what I am interpreting that if I build a lesson from a book, it is considered transformative. I am not telling you that if you build a lesson from a book, it is transformative and you'll be fine. I'm telling you that's how I have interpreted this. Everyone has to research for themselves and look critically at the lesson that you're offering and in your class description and what's happening there, and you analyze for yourself whether or not you feel like your content fits under the umbrella of fair use. Okay, so I told you I wrote to 2 publishers. The first publisher actually is a really large publisher. They're on Facebook, and I actually sent them a message because I wanted to know if I could use one of their very popular reading instructional books in one of my Outschool classes. And I've been trained in this method of teaching. I've used it for many, many years in public school and in homeschool. I reached out to them, kind of gave them a little bit of my background and just, you know, do I have permission to use this book in my online classroom with Outschool? And I got an immediate, just automatically generated response that was, you know, due to COVID-19, here's what we're allowing for read alouds online. And that really wasn't my question. So I said, well, that's really not my question. Thank you for your response. And I just kind of restated my original question. And then I got a person that responded, you're going to have to email this email address and ask, you know, for permission there. And so I did that. That's been about 2 weeks and I have not heard anything. I also have just emailed another publisher directly about a storybook. I have not heard from that publisher either. So I do feel like it is very worth investigating and finding out so that you're comfortable. If there are any questions, you've got this information and you're able to say, hey, I did my homework here. And I just feel better even having done all of this research and I have all of these sources. I feel like I'm obeying the rules here and I really want to do that. I do not want to take anything for granted and just say, it's okay. Nobody will know, nobody will care, because that's not how I want to run my business, and I want to make sure that I know the rules so I can follow them. I hope this video is helpful for you. I know, like I said, it's a hot topic. Everybody wants to know. You've got to do your homework, but I hope this gives you a place to start, and I hope this gives you some kind of understanding of what constitutes fair use. All right, guys. I hope this helps. Thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments if you found this helpful, and be sure to hit the bell so you'll know when another Outschool video comes out. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.